Our fears of a new front in the war between Israel and Hamas are heightening as the chief of the Lebanese-militant group Hezbollah meets top leaders of Palestinian militant factions Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. They discuss what their alliance must do in order to achieve what they call real victory for the resistance in Gaza. The three groups form the, quote, axis of resistance and are made up of Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian and other Iran-backed armed groups opposed to Israel. The Israeli military says Iran is behind the recent spate of attacks by militia groups in Yemen, Iraq and Lebanon. It's accusing Tehran of providing Hamas with intelligence in the Gaza Strip and stoking anti-Israeli sentiment globally.
איראן סייעה לחמאס לפני המלחמה במישרין, באימונים, בהספקת אמצעי לחימה, כסף, ידע טכנולוגי. גם ברגעים אלה נמשך הסיוע האיראני לחמאס במודיעין ובהסתה ברשתות ובדרבון בכל העולם בהסתה כנגד מדינת ישראל.
The diplomatic fallout between Israel and the United Nations also going up a notch. Israel says it will refuse visas to UN officials entering the country. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, reportedly told the country's army radio, quote, "The time has come to teach them a lesson." All this comes as Israel calls for the resignation of UN Chief Antonio Guterres after a heated session at the Security Council this week. Mr. Guterres had condemned Hamas but sparked Israeli anger after alleging, without naming Israel, that there had been violations of international law in Gaza by asking civilians to evacuate from the north to the south and then bombing the south.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. I am deeply concerned about the clear violations of international humanitarian law that we are witnessing in Gaza. Let me be clear, no party to an armed conflict is above international humanitarian law.
Mr. Secretary General, in what world do you live? Definitely, this is not our world. This massacre will go down in history as more brutal than ISIS. Hamas are new Nazis.
Hamas was not represented at the meeting, but the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank, was there. Its envoy criticized what he said was inaction by the Security Council to stop the killing of Palestinians.
The Security Council has a duty to stop them. The international community is obliged under international law to stop them. It is our collective human duty to stop them. Now, continued failure at this council is inexcusable.
For more, Sarah Coates joins us live from Tel Aviv. Sarah, the Hamas-Hezbollah meeting, or the picture of that, suggests the two militant groups and the Islamic Jihad group coordinating at least on some level. What is the major concern about this?
Hello. Well, look, certainly the main concern here is Iran and what it could potentially be planning to do to U.S. personnel, U.S. assets and U.S. allies here in the region if indeed Israel does make this long talked about ground incursion into the Gaza Strip. As you mentioned, all of these three groups, Hezbollah, Hamas and also Palestinian Islamic Jihad, are backed by Iran. And look, there are real fears over the Islamic Republic's involvement in the context of this conflict. Now, these three representatives from these three groups did make a statement. We don't know when that meeting was held, but they have agreed upon what they say the parties of the axis of the resistance must do to prevent, quote, Israeli aggression, adding that they will achieve a real victory in Gaza. Now, look, this is very, very concerning given been this real spike of violence, this real uptick we're seeing on the northern border. Only around an hour ago, a long-range rocket was fired from the Gaza Strip all the way up north. It reached almost Haifa, but was intercepted in the sky. Residents in these communities have been told to stay in shelter, while cross-border fire is continuing on the northern border between IDF troops and what they say are Hezbollah militants. So, look, this is very, very concerning. If there is some sort of a further spillover in this region, what the next step by Iran could potentially be.
And that's the battlefront on the ground. Sarah, the diplomatic front, we saw boiling tensions between the United Nations and Israel. We hear Israel already refusing to grant UN officials entry to the country. So this is likely to have wide implications in terms of diplomatic efforts to reach some resolution of what's happening in the Middle East right now.
It certainly is. It's extremely messy. And look, the fallout does continue. As you mentioned, these United Nations staff have been denied visas to enter Israel. But look, at this stage, it is not clear on just how far that visa ban will extend. We do know that there are a large number of workers from UN aid agencies like UNRWA working on the ground to bring this much-needed aid to these Palestinian refugees. So, look, it is still unclear as to whether these workers on the ground, these immediate aid workers, will still be able to operate. But, look, UNRWA did come out to say early this morning that it does have only a matter of hours left on the ground. It gave the deadline of tonight, it is now the afternoon here, until they will have to, quote, cease operations simply due to the fact that they do not have enough fuel to operate. So it's a very dire and critical situation in the Strip.
Thanks. That's Sarah Coates reporting live from Tel Aviv.
Staying in the Middle East, the humanitarian crisis continues to worsen in Gaza. The Palestinian enclave is running out of fuel fast, and the UN's main aid agency warns its operations will cease by the end of the day if it cannot get more fuel. Some hospitals already begun limiting their services to critical cases only. The WHO says 6 other hospitals have already been forced to shut down. Global pressure is building for Israel to allow fuel in, but Israel is firmly opposed, accusing Hamas of using the supplies for its own military infrastructure. It contradicts an earlier statement by IDF saying that efforts will be made to allow fuel to pass into Gaza. Aid agencies report that shelters and emergency tent cities are heaving under the weight of more than 1 million displaced individuals. The UN Refugee Agency says that their shelters are 4 times over the capacities, with many people forced to sleep in the streets. It adds that nearly 600,000 people are sheltering in about 150 of its facilities in Gaza. Israel has been intensifying its airstrikes as it prepares for a ground offensive in the Strip. Forces say they have bombed several Hamas positions in wide-scale strikes across Gaza. They released this footage of targets said to be used by the militant group as they were hit by Israeli missiles. Scenes of devastation across central and south Gaza, with rescuers scrambling to pull the dead and wounded out of collapsed buildings. Residents and civil defense workers in the city of Khan Yunis have struggled to extract bodies under the rubble due to lack of resources.
توجهنا على وجه السرعة للمكان ووجدنا ما يقارب 15 أو 16 بيت مهدمات. قمنا بالعمل على إجلاء المصابين بالإمكانيات المتاحة وشح الإمكانات. بفضل الله تم إجلاء كل المصابين، ولكن نظرا لعدم توفر المعدات اللازمة لاستكمال العمل تم توقيف العمل ليلا بعد ما يأس طواقم الدفاع المدني من إجلاء مصابين أو وجود مصابين. تم انسحابنا وعودتنا الساعة 7 صباحا لنفس المكان.
The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says more than 6,000 people have been killed since the strikes began on the 7th of October. Clashes have also intensified even beyond the Gaza Strip. More than 100 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank have been killed by Israeli raids. Diplomatic efforts also continuing to try to mitigate the crisis. Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister met with his Turkish counterpart earlier. The Qatari leader is hoping for a breakthrough on hostage releases soon, as its mediators urge Hamas to quicken the pace of hostage releases.